Well, hello, Sam.
Hello.
Thank you for
Danielle.
coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Please tell me about yourself.
Where do you want
Well, introduce yourself. That's what I need.
Sam Edwards. I've been a business owner for about 14 years. Before then, it was a little bit more circuitous, all the stuff that I did. I came born in 1950 into a two-room sharecropper shack with a dirt floor and no running water and no electricity. And 26 years later, I was an aide to the President of the United States. Now, normally when somebody says that, it's a self-aggrandizing jackass who's going to spend another 2 or 3 paragraphs telling you how wonderful he is and how the universe is lucky to have him and how he got from dirt floor to the White House. Well, I didn't get there because of what I did. I got there in spite of what I did. So I was a lousy student, juvenile delinquent, everything you could do wrong to get to where I got to, I did.
Well, that's the most successful stories that everybody has.
That's right. You succeed in spite of yourself. That's exactly what that was all about. But it was just one of those kismet, serendipity moments where I was in the right place at the right time when the President of the United States came to our hometown, and that the state senator I knew who was an in-law to the president, President Carter at the time, and I knew him because I played football this summer in high school. Mm-hmm. And because I was a Mill Village kid, you normally don't know folks in the leadership. But because if you're an athlete in your town, everybody knows you in a little bitty town of 2,500 people. So the president and the senator's grandson had just been born. So the president came to our town to see his new grandson. So I was just back from the Army and had finally got into college and kind of graduated and was in law school here in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And the state senator said, the president's coming to town. Can you come and be the local liaison for the staff while they're planning the trip and help them plan the trip, whatever they need you to do? So I said, sure. So I spent about 12 or 13 days helping plan the presidential trip. And it was a lot of the stuff the Army taught me how to do, how to plan and execute a mission. And but the funniest thing about it was when you're living in a town with 2,500 people, everybody knows who you are. The last person they expected to see walking with the President of the United States was me. And that what really illustrated that to me is when I came out of the First Baptist Church leading the President and Miss Carter and Amy to the limousine, I looked across the hood of the limousine and I saw a guy that I played football with in high school. And he turned to his wife and he said, what in the hell is that crazy Edwards doing walking next to the President of the United States? And I looked around, the whole town's thinking the same thing. But the fact is that I went back to school, didn't think anything more about it, and 3 weeks later I got offered a job to come work. So that's how I got there, and it was just serendipity. There's no way in the world I would have ever gotten there had I not been there at that time in Calhoun, Georgia, when the president happened to come, we'd never had a president visit the town before. Mm-hmm. So that's how that happened. And so off and on for the next 5 years, I was an aide to him. I was an advance man. Wherever you went, I'd help make the trips, make the preparations for the trip. Mm-hmm. So big stuff for a kid from nowhere. So
I think is the best success stories come from when you come from nothing.
Oh yeah,
you appreciate the nothing, and then
sure.
When you start having something, it's like it's more appreciated for you.
Yeah.
But I did a little bit of research about you. You have an amazing resume, I would say, as the person you are.
Still alive.
Yeah, that's it. Well, you the writer, you you were in the military, right? You're the veteran. Thank you for your service.
Appreciate that.
You were a spy. I don't know. We're about to get to that. That's very interesting.
Wait a minute, you're a Russian.
Yeah, it was like
I
a
can't
Russian.
be telling you anything.
And people always tell me I'm the spy, so it's like it's gonna be perfect.
I will have to shoot you. It's over there.
We'll get to some agreement.
My gun handy.
Yeah. We'll get to some agreement.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also now you're the restaurant owner, one of the successful restaurants.
Yeah. It was. I was never business oriented. I've done so many different things. A lot of blue collar work when I was growing up, and then I worked for the Senator John Glenn from Ohio, who was an astronaut and a famous American for a year. And so I made documentary films. I've done just about everything you can do. You think sometimes.
And you were a photographer too, right?
Well, I made a documentary film, and but I was an actor for a while in L.A., and I was a starving artist in L.A., living on an old leaky boat and trying to make a living as a writer. And so I've lived a little bit of everywhere and around the world a good bit. But I was in Afghanistan in '09 covering the war over there, and doing some other government work that we'll talk about it later. and almost got blown up 3 times in 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And I had just turned 60, and I said, I don't need this anymore. I'm going home. So I came home. I didn't have a clue about what I really wanted to do. I knew I had some books, 2 other books I needed to write that I already started. And then I was over in Rome, Georgia, and having lunch with a friend of mine who owned a Subway. And across the street from the Subway was a little restaurant that was for sale. And I have a little airplane, and I had flown over there. It's only a short flight, 10-minute flight from my town to Rome, Calhoun to Rome. So I went over there, and I was sitting having lunch with him. He said, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I got a couple of more books I want to write, but I said, I'm not sure. The last bomb that went off is still resonating in my ears, and so I got to wait till my mind clears. And he said, well, you forget about that because your mind ain't never going to get clear. So, because he knew me. And then he said, I think that restaurant's for sale over there across the street. And I said, well, man, I don't know anything about the restaurant business. And he said, that's never stopped you from doing anything before. And I said, I know. And so I didn't think anything about it. And then I walked across the street and stood on the deck of the thing. And I had a buddy of mine who had been in the restaurant before, and I'd helped him a little bit in it. And I stood on the deck, and I literally said, we got this restaurant here. I could fly back and forth to work. Mm-hmm. That's not the way you go into a business simply because it's your mode of transportation is what making you come to the restaurant.
That's a crazy thought. Let me fly out every day to the work.
Yeah. So anyway, we ended up buying the thing, and then it was the last franchise of a place called Schroeder's Deli that had been downtown Rome for 30 years, and then they had a franchise operation going on that they didn't have any control over, and it lasted a few years. And this was the last one of the franchise. And so we bought the business, but we didn't have to buy the franchise. The Schroeders, everybody knows who the Schroeders are, and I knew them some. And they said, just pay us a percentage of whatever you sell, and you can sell anything else you want. So it was a deli that I turned into a burger joint because. Mm-hmm. The first term I spent in college, I spent in the library researching how herbs and spices affect the palate. Mm-hmm. And because I'd cooked next to my mom all my life, so I'd always liked to cook. And so I came up with an herb spice concoction that turned all the hamburgers I cooked at my fraternity house into a rage all over campus. And that ended up being the hamburger that won the best burger in Rome 4 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's not because of anything else. It's not because of the toppings. It's because of what you do to the meat, because it all starts there. So anyway, that's what started my restaurant career. And then I bought my partner out in 2012, I think. And then when I was 65, I did 3 things you're not supposed to do. I got married for the first time. I ran with the bulls in Pamplona. And I borrowed $1 million to build a restaurant. So
that's 3 bold moves right there.
And the bull thing and the marriage thing, boy, it's some parallels there that I don't want to get into because my wife is sitting right over here.
She's got you on the tape right now.
Everybody said that. Said you got married and you ran with the bulls. What was different about it? I said, well, I can tell a chicken about that. But anyway, so the restaurant was doing great. The first year, I did the small building, which was 99 seats, and the bigger building was like 300 seats. Mm-hmm. The 2 big airplanes out front, and that was another one of those things that came from my brain that we don't need to get into, but I will. And so I expanded the menu and put burgers on it, and I created a Philly steak cheese that everybody says is the best in Rome as well, but they don't do a category for that. But everybody that writes about it says it is, and Fox News has been up there covering it as well. Back in one Veterans Day. And this thing in the restaurant, I put veterans pictures on the wall. There's 4,000 pictures on the veterans on the wall. Everybody walks in this door that is a veteran, their picture goes on the wall. Mm-hmm. So it was a veteran themed restaurant, and so in one respect, but it was just different from anything that Rome had ever had before. And we did really well 17, bought the building in, what was that, 15 or 16 maybe, and then spent a year and a half ripping this doctor's office apart and building a restaurant. And then we opened in 17, and 17, next 2 years did really good business, grew 25% a year. And then COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And it put the brakes on everything. So,
Yeah,
like
how
it did
you
to all
handle
restaurants.
it? How'd you handle it?
Well, the first thing I did is after nobody could come into the restaurant. Now I've got 300 seats inside the building and a big deck. The biggest deck in Rome at the time had 60 seats outside.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but I need more space outside because I don't have a drive-through. And if you had a drive-through, you're going to do all right. Drive-through restaurants did really well in COVID because you couldn't come in anywhere, remember?
Mm-hmm.
So without any sanction from the city, I got a couple of buddies of mine, and we expanded that deck to seat 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only way you're going to survive. You got to feed people, and you got to have seats for them.
Right.
And they got to be spread out. So we built the deck. Then I got in trouble with the city for doing that, and I got called before the magistrate's judge. And I spent $5,000 or $10,000 that I didn't have building the deck, and then I got called before the magistrate's judge and threatened to get thrown in jail and a $5,000 fine, and being hung by the neck until dead, and all that kind of stuff that you do when you get at cross purpose with the city. And even though I love all those guys, and luckily the magistrate judge, she told me not to. My wife's a veterinarian. A magistrate's judge said in the courtroom, he said, "I know I'm going to be partial to taking care of Mr. Edwards here. He's a good guy. Everybody loves his food." And said, besides that, his wife has been taking care of my pets for 10 years. So I said, well, maybe I'm going to get off of this. Maybe the marriage ain't a bad thing after all. So anyway, and Gene Richardson's the judge. And Judge, I'm kidding kind of sort of about this, but it was really true what he said. So anyway, it helped, but it didn't cure the problem. And the problem was, everybody in the restaurant business knows the margins are like 5%, if you're lucky. It's a nickel out of every dollar if you can make that. Mm-hmm. You can't even do that, so with the prices being what they are. But we stayed alive with the stuff, with the money we got from the government. That kept everybody alive. Everybody had a restaurant in town. That was the only thing that kept us going. And but it was a sit-down restaurant. It was a full-service sit-down restaurant. It's kind of fast casual, but it is a sit-down full service with waitresses and all. But it was still a struggle. It's still a struggle, So last May, my wife told me, she says, "You're 75 years old. You don't need to be working 75 hours a week." I said, "You're right." So we found this couple who is a Navy veteran and his wife, and they've been in the restaurant business a lot. And so we sold the business to them, and I kept the building. So I'm still part of the operation. And because when we made the deal, and I essentially gave them everything just to keep it going, because I had some other books I really wanted to write. And I keep my office in the back where it always was. So I told them, I said, when you guys assume the business, I'm going to do everything I can to make this thing keep going, because I spent 14 years building this business. I don't want it to go anywhere.
All right, it's your baby.
Yeah, it's my baby, and and it's the only restaurant in the world with 2 jets sticking out the front of it. So and I do that. I got them a catering order, a catering job that I had for a year, that I went back and made sure that I got that again, because that's really what helps right now is catering. And everybody that knows restaurant business knows catering is where the money is. It's not in sit-down restaurant stuff. So so the catering and the businesses in the area that we are in Rome is growing. I mean, really growing a lot to the north. Rome is growing in every direction for that matter. But so they're doing pretty well. They're the gentleman, the Navy guy, has been involved in 14 restaurants a lot in Atlanta. And Thomas and Cammie, and they and he knows a lot more about running restaurants and how to make stuff that I don't know how to make. Because he's done just about every kind of restaurant there is. So they're doing well in that regard because they're making it. The other one of the things that I did during COVID, we shrunk the menu down so that our overhead was lower. So which almost everybody said that's what you need to do, and so but they're doing okay now because of that and the fact that they just know a lot about the restaurant business that I didn't know. So I'm fully expect that thing to be going another 14 years because of the hands that it's in now.
Well, you build a foundation, so with the strong foundation, I think it's just going up.
Yeah, and again, that area is growing so much, so rapidly out where we are. I mean, every time you turn around, there's another building going up, and the whole town, Rome, is a very vibrant city. The Three Rivers, 2 colleges, the largest college campus in the world, Berry College, is a mile from our restaurant.
Okay. Well, I definitely want to come check it out.
Yeah.
Question for you.
Sir? Yeah, okay.
Are those real jets?
Yeah.
And where's the concept came from? Because that's a very unique and insane concept.
I guess I'm going to tell the treehouse story. In 1992, I was just back. I got in a grant to write a book. I moved back to Calhoun, and this is my buddy who I was in the restaurant business with to begin with, Haley. And he had bought an old building in Calhoun, and he wanted to put a restaurant in it. And I had come back because I got a grant, needed to write this book. And he said, and we've been swapping favors back and forth forever. I'd do him a favor, then he'd do me a favor, if I was ever in town long enough. So I said, okay, I'll help you with this thing for like 6 months, and then I've got to get started on this book because I got this grant I'm responsible for. So it took us a year to get the thing going. So during that time, I said, I need a place to write, and while we're not doing this, and he said, well, just go back up there. And he knew because I was really good with my hands growing up. I was a carpenter and built tree houses when I was little. Mm-hmm. And so he just go back up there on the back of the lot and build yourself something. So I walked up there, and I saw this big 60-foot oak tree, and I was like 5 years old again. I said, I'm going to build a tree house right there. So I built the tree house. It was just a box, and then about an 800-square-foot box, about 14 feet off the ground. Mm-hmm. And then one day I'm out there looking at it, and I'm going, it was just bland because I don't like to paint. I don't like colors. I'm a black and white guy, or black today. And so I said, this thing just needs some color, and I'd been flying all my life, since I was 20. Something, hang gliders and ultralights and experimental airplanes and everything. And so I said, this thing just needs some color, and I thought, airplane. So I went down to Griffin, Georgia, and at Atlanta Air Salvage, and found that fuselage that's sticking out of that the treehouse. I don't think you probably haven't seen that picture. Anyway, so I put the airplane in there, and then I found an old boat behind my buddy's house, and I put the boat up there and made a bedroom out of it. And then I found a submarine over at Lake Lanier that was a prop in an Elvis movie in the 60s, and I brought it in and hooked it up and made a bathroom out of it. And then this was Home and Garden Television had done a lot of stories about the treehouse, and for years. This was probably at the end of the 10th year I'd been there. So they called me up one day and said, we want to film you doing an addition to the treehouse of some kind. And I said, well, I've got a boat and an airplane and a submarine. I said, well,
like a really perfect addition.
Yeah, you got any ideas?
Collection is
crazy. So they said, well, come up with something. And I said, when? They said, 10 days. I said, what? So I said, okay, I'll come up with something. So my intent was to go down to Atlanta Air Salvage, and the airplane fuselage runs through to the front of the treehouse, and then on the other side of it, I was going to find the nose of it and put like it ran all the way through it. I said, well, that'll cure them, Mm-hmm. Well, I got down there, and I couldn't find the nose, but I did find a helicopter. And I love helicopters, and I had a little helicopter time in the Army. So I got the helicopter and put it in. So they filmed that whole episode, and then, but during the time, MTV Cribs had been there 2 different times. Extreme Cribs had been in the house. Cribs first, and then Extreme Cribs, and then in 2008, a team from the BBC in London came, and they were doing a series called The World's Most Extreme Homes. And so they called me up and said, we want to come see your house and do a show about it. And I said, okay. And I said, how did you find me? And this is what just blows your mind. She said, we were in Kobe, Japan, filming a show about a guy who built a house out of these big wine casks. Well, over the years, a lot of people have come up there, professional photographers and such, had taken pictures of the house. She said, we had a coffee table book that was laying out there, and the guy that was building the houses, or the wine cask house, said, have y'all ever shot anything in the States? Mm-hmm. And she says, no, but we're going next year. And so he flipped to open them. He said, you got to go see this house. And the producer said, what? We didn't know what that was, you know. So she said, we did a little research on it, and she said, we want to come do it. And I said, okay. So they showed up, World's Most Extreme Homes, and she told me, she says, you may not know this, but this is the most famous treehouse in the world. I said, in Calhoun, Georgia? She said, we have shot homes all over the world. We've been doing this show now for 8 or 9 years. She said, but if you mention treehouse to any place that we go to about, you know, give me is there an odd treehouse around here? They said, have you seen the one with the boat, the airplane, the submarine, the helicopter in it? She said, this is the only one like that. I said, no kidding. So I said, well, that makes a little bit of sense. You know, who else does that, or who else has done that? So that's how that all started in my head. That's where my brain is. So I bought this building for the restaurant, and it had, after we cleaned all the trees out and done everything at the front, it had a really plain facade out front. It was just a flat building. Mm-hmm. And it's really Melissa, my wife's fault, that these airplanes came in, because she drove by it one day and coming from work and said, you've got to do something with the front of that building. It's just really plain. She meant Plain. So I go to sleep, and I'm thinking, I said, I got to do something, but it really didn't hit me about a plane. But I had a dream that night of a bullet airplane, not any airplanes I fly propeller airplanes, but a bullet plane sticking out of the front of the building. So when I woke up, I said, I gotta find that, you know, because what I saw in my dream was, it made that whole building look really spectacular, because it's right on Highway 27, and, you know, millions of cars there every year. So I called up my buddies that I've been flying with all these years, and I said, I need an old airplane that I got a project for it. And they said, well, if you want an old airplane, you got to go to the boneyard in Arizona. And I said, man, I don't have any money to go to the boneyard in Arizona. It costs a fortune to get them back. So one of my buddies said, I think I saw an old airplane down in the Cedartown, Polk County Airport a few years ago. Mm-hmm. So I jumped in my little plane, flew down there. I looked at the airplane. I pulled up to the office and looked at the two airplanes sitting out there, which I knew the ones he was talking about. And I said, well, those things are not going to work. So I'll go into I don't have any reason to get out of the airplane. Most of the time, you just turn around and come back, because what he told you about is not what you can use. So I go into the airport manager's office, and a guy named Sam Branch. And Sam says, I said, who belongs to those airplanes out there? He said, the guys that own them think they're worth a lot of money. They don't want to sell them. And he said, what do you need? And I said, I'm looking for an old airplane. He said, go and look in that big hangar back there. The county's got one they've been trying to get rid of. They need, you know, it's been there 10 years. And I said, what? He said, go look at it. I'll go in there and open the door. And there's an airplane I had seen in my dream sitting right there in front of me. My heart leaped out, and I said, God, what is this beautiful airplane doing that I saw last night in my dream? And it's sitting right here in front of me. And I'm going, it looks like it's going to cost a lot of money, but I have to have it because I saw it in my dream. So I go back and I said, what's the story? He said, I don't know the story. He said, I'm new at this job. I don't know anything about it. So I go back and I call my county manager. He calls his counterpart down in Polk County. He said, they'll auction it off on the courthouse steps in 11 days. Mm-hmm. I said, okay. So here's the problem I got. This is a serious dilemma. I have to have that airplane. I'm out of money on the build project, because everything, when you start a project like this, you always over budget. So I'm wondering, how much can I pay for that airplane that won't get me a divorce? Even though it was her idea, she told me I needed something. So I show up down there with a buddy of mine. The tax commissioner comes out, and I'm the only person standing there. I thought there'd be 1,000 people bidding on that airplane, because that airplane would still fly. Now, it didn't have the flight logs with it, which meant you couldn't sell it, mm-hmm. but it would still fly. You could get a ferry permit to take it somewhere if you needed to do that. So the lady looked down at me, and she says, the taxes owed on that airplane are $2,800. I said, I ain't gonna get divorced over $2,800. So I wrote the check so fast I was putting holes in it.
You
so
bought a plane for $2,800.
Huh? Yeah, I bought that airplane for $2,800. It was worth $1 million. So, and I'll get to how that happened. But anyway, so I got a bunch of veteran buddies of mine and another buddy of mine named Monty, and we went down there and started taking it apart. And for about 2 months, we worked on taking that thing up. No, 2 months. It was more like a month and a half. We worked taking it apart, and it's a French jet called a Falcon, and very fast airplane of it for its time. Got it up there, got it put in the air, got it situated, built around it, and then when I stepped back and looked at it, and I said, that's exactly what I saw in my dream. Mm-hmm. That's weird stuff, number one. The second part that's weird about it, that airplane's tail number was 97 Whiskey Juliet. So 3 years later, I get a call from a buddy of mine at McCullum Airport down in Kennesaw here.
Okay.
And he says, there's an old jet that they got down here they want to get rid of. I said, I'll be right there. So I get down there, and it's a G2. It's the big one next to it. So I get down there, and I said, God, this thing is just so pretty. And the inside of it's like brand new. The guy that owned it spent $1.5 million on the inside of it, and it flew 5 times after that. It's just like brand new. It looks like something Trump would fly. There's gold everywhere. Mm-hmm. All the leather's brand new. All the mahogany's brand new. I mean, it's just extraordinary. It still had the china in it. And it had been on the MacGyver series on a couple of 2 or 3 episodes. So the airport, the guy that owned it, who was a Hawthorne Aviation guy, says, if you can get that airplane in here 30 days, you can have it. I said, not a problem. So we had to get permits this time. The other time we moved it, we didn't get any permits, but I don't even want to go into that story. So because it was a 35,000 pound airplane, mm-hmm. And 80 feet long. So you can't get it from, I would have gotten put in jail in every county and trying to get back. So anyway, we got all the permits done, got it taken apart, and got it up there. And then after we got it set, a guy came in named Jim Karlovich, and Jim is a pilot and that I'd known for a while. And he said, you want to know the story of this airplane? I said, yeah. So he was telling me about the first airplane. He said, this belonged to a guy named William Johnson who owned 200 Waffle Houses. He lived at One Paces Ferry in Atlanta, was a double billionaire, been in business forever. The big church on West Paces Ferry, I forgot what the name of that thing is, but he was one of the founders of that big church.
That's
I forgot what it is, but it's huge. Everybody knows what it is. But anyway, so he said, and then the Gulfstream you got out here is kind of odd too. And I said, why is that? And he said, it's a sister airplane to this airplane. I find 2 airplanes 50 miles apart, 3 years apart, owned by the same guy.
That's
Not
crazy.
only that, they were sister airplanes, 97 Whiskey Juliet and 98 Whiskey Juliet. Mm-hmm. Weird stuff just doesn't stop, does it?
The coincidences, but
No kidding. Nothing with that Kismet stuff. So put that in there, and then I got it set like I wanted it to sit, because I didn't want it to sit at the same level as the other airplane. I wanted it to sit like they were flying in tandem and one a little bit, not in tandem, but in formation. So got it put in, and it just it took something that was really extraordinary and made it really something else. Then the flying bus in the front also helped out. There's a flying Volkswagen bus with wings on it up on a pole, and that's my sign. So anyway, are the guys with the nets and the white jackets come in yet? So anyway, that's that whole piece of me. Like, I don't have a clue about. I had a buddy of mine one time said, after I built the treehouse, that he saw after I'd been on TV a bunch, and he'd been sitting next to me and drinking a few beers, and he looked at me one time and he said, Edwards, if somebody could see inside your brain, it'd probably scare him to death. I said, why? He said, well, look, where's all this crazy stuff come
This is
from?
like everything. It's just like
it's all
that's not related to each other. You can just put it together.
Yes, I know, Melissa. We were watching this show that night called Dirt Gently, the holistic, and half the stuff that he does in there, I go, oh, I've thought that too before, But I think with him, it was some psychological trip from back in the 70s or whatever. Me, it was just normal, So.
You're just born like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Before we move, I have so many questions.
Yeah.
But before we move to your continue with your business,
Yeah.
I would like to know more about you personally. How did you get to the spot? What was the whole story behind it?
Okay.
What would you do before?
Like I said, I never graduated from high school. I went to school 13 years and 4 summers and still didn't have enough years to graduate. I was a good athlete. It's the only reason I was passing. Right? Football coach would say, we need him, So when I didn't graduate, my football coach came and got me after I'd run away from home again. I did that a lot when I was growing up. And I was the most successful enterprise I had when I was growing up is being a really good juvenile delinquent because of all the petty crimes I ever committed. And they were really petty, mostly mischievous stuff. I never got caught doing anything. And so so the coach got me into college, and because he knew the president of a school, little junior college up the street from in the next town from us, and because he didn't want to see me run off on the rails and end up in jail somewhere. And so I got into college on probation without a diploma or without a GED. This is 1969, 70. You could get away with stuff like that then. And so I worked a lot of, construction jobs. I helped build the Carter's Dam up in North Georgia and sewage treatment plants, worked on form carpenter doing that kind of stuff, and just a lot of labor stuff. So a buddy of mine had gotten killed in Vietnam in 1970. And the war was raging, but I had a high draft number. I wasn't going, But his getting killed, Mike King, Eli King was his name. And so 1972 was running around, and I said, you know what? I don't know what I want to do, but I need to go do my bit. I read everything when I was growing up. I read the encyclopedia, World Book Encyclopedia all the way through twice, all 18 volumes. Didn't go to class much, but I read the encyclopedia. So it gave me a sense of the world and a sense of what you owe your country. So I called my uncle up, who was on my way to Chattanooga to enlist, and I just walked. I didn't tell my parents. I never told them anything because I always tried to talk me out of it, which is not going to happen. So my uncle had been an Army lifer. He'd been in 22 years. He was my favorite uncle because he was always somewhere around the world doing some stuff. And I was his favorite nephew because I was always the one who was in trouble and had a lot of great stories that my parents wouldn't tell him and all the rest of the family would tell him because they didn't know about it. And so I called him up and told him I was doing it. And he said, come talk to me first. So I went up there and started talking to him, and he had spent his last 10 years in a group called the Army Security Agency, which is the Army branch of the National Security Agency. So he said, don't go today. I need you to come up and talk to my old colonel. And he lived up in Chattanooga, and his colonel lived real close to him. And he was a command sergeant major, highest ranking enlisted man you could be. So went up and talked to the colonel, and the colonel says, told my uncle, said, John, you go ahead home. Sam and I are going to take a trip tomorrow. All I wanted to do was sign the, I didn't need any of this mishigas. I just wanted to join the dang Army. So the colonel takes me to a place that I don't know where it is in his little airplane in a beach barren in about a 4-hour flight, as I remember. And I spend the next 30 some odd days getting every kind of test done to me that you could even think of, and all of them weird. And so my uncle had told me before, he said, I think the only place you can survive and not end up in Leavenworth, in the military prison, is a group that I was in. And I'm not going to tell you any more about it because the colonel lets you know that when it's time. He said, they're going to give you all these tests, and trust me, the higher you make on the crazy test, the more they're going to like you. And he kind of agreed. He said, they're going to love you. So I didn't know what he was talking about, So literally, I got out of the place where the colonel had me, and I was taken to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and that's how I got enlisted. I literally had 2 guys in suits that brought me from what I now know is Fort Meade, Maryland, NSA headquarters, back to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and took me into a room and said, we're going to call a sergeant in here, and you're going to enlist. The last 6 weeks never happened. You can't ever tell anybody what just happened. I found out years later there was a bit of some kind of project that they were doing about psychological stuff, and they needed a guinea pig, I guess. And I don't think I was the only one. I was probably the one that shut the program down. But anyway, so that's kind of how that started. So, but I didn't have, in basic training, I didn't have any patches or anything. I was like a non-entity. But I got made the platoon guide, which I was in charge of the platoon for some reason, because nobody else was crazy enough to do it, I guess. So the company commander called me in one day, and he said, "Who are you?" Because I didn't have a name. He said, "Where's your?" I said, "Colonel, you're the." I didn't really want to say this. I didn't want to be a smart butt, but I said, "Colonel, I mean, I'm your troop," because I couldn't tell him what I just where I'd gotten here, because they told me not to, So he said, "Get out of my office." So I left, and I said, "I made the colonel, man. I haven't done anything." And he brought me in about 2 weeks before graduation from basic, and he said, "I know who you are. I don't like people like you. Get out of my office." And regular Army guys and intel guys almost never get along. It's just two different animals. So I went from basic training to Fort Meade, to Arlington Hall Station, which was an ASA, Army Security Agency unit, small unit, and it's a really tiny unit anyway, and then straight into Southeast Asia, up into northern Thailand, where the operation was spying on Laos and Canada and North Vietnam. This was at the end of the war. The war literally had already been over with. But in wars, normally the first people in are intel guys, and the first person killed in Vietnam in 1959 or 60 was an ASA guy, because you send an ASA guy, saying the intel guys in first to tell you what's going on, and that way you know where to send the troops. So I got there and and that's what we did. I mean, the group, it was electronic stuff. It was putting listening devices on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and this was 73, 74, right before the collapse in Saigon, because the Pentagon needed to know how many people were coming, how many North Vietnamese were coming in to take over Saigon when everybody left. So we spent a year there, 10 months, me and the Special Forces Lieutenant, who was the OIC of the little group, and I was the NCOIC. And not a scratch, never got in harm's way, really. Snuck around a little bit. And then August 18th of 74, I'm 2 weeks short going to flight school, and he and I got in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's where that near-death experience that I wrote about came from. We got caught by about 15 or 20. We don't even know who these guys were. They were either Pathat Lao, which is the communist contingent that was about to take over Laos, just like the North Vietnamese had taken over South Vietnam. Or it was a bunch of mercenaries that were used to fight for us that had gotten mad because we sent them, took their jobs away when we quit fighting. We don't know who they were. But it was midnight, monsoon season, raindrops big as your fist, couldn't see anything. We just walked into one another, two of us and 15 or 20 guys. And so they got into me first pretty bad, and about 5 or 6 of them peeled off and went with the Special Forces guy. If it had been reversed, it'd have been okay, because he knew how to kill you by putting his finger on your nose, But I was just I was a boxer. I didn't know how to fight 15 people at one time. So anyway, pistol whipping and rifle butts banging in your head for, we don't know how long this lasted. It was either 3 or 4 minutes or an hour, but it was probably more like 3 or 4 minutes. But I got knocked out a bunch of times, and I'd go into the water and I'd get back up and start to fight all over again. And the only way you could fight folks like that, because they're literally like this, is just to grab anybody you can get by the neck and strangle them. So the last time I got hit, I went into the water and I'd lost a lot of blood, and all of a sudden the big white light comes out. Okay, so that's the near-death experience. And everything goes real calm. You can't hear anything. Everything goes, it's just, and it's not a white light like that light up there. It's like a presence. It just fully you're absorbed by it, and it's everywhere. Now, the weird thing about it was that I didn't realize this for a long time, was that this left eye had already been swollen shut, so I couldn't see anything. But this eye here I could still see out of a little bit, but the light was the same on both sides. So it wasn't something you could see.
Right.
It was a presence.
Filling.
Yeah. So I don't know how long this happened, how long the presence was there, but I heard a metallic click, and I looked up, and there was a .45 sticking in my eye. And so, but I can't move. I've lost too much blood. I can't even reach up and grab that pistol. I can't move. I'm completely exhausted. So when I saw his finger move inside the trigger housing, I said, dude, this is it. But I yelled Jimmy, who is my buddy, the Special Forces guy, just as loud as I could. And then when the click happened, all of a sudden the light was gone completely. And then after the click happened, it was like, am I still dead? Or am I dead or am I still alive? Because you don't know. The click is just something that lingers. So then I heard him cussing in Laotian, the Laotian language. And I said, well, this can't be heaven. This must be other place. This guy's cussing in my ear, and he's mad because the weapon didn't fire. And it was a 45, and everybody knows the 45s don't misfire. So I didn't know this, but Jimmy said after I'd yelled at him, he started running back to me, and he somehow got to me through all that madness. But again, it's pitch black. You can't see this far in front of your face. So when he got into me and grabbed me by the shoulders and said, get up, let's go, somehow he gave me energy, and we got up and we got out of. That's how we got out of there. We don't know how we got out. He got hit in the mouth with a grenade, and it tore this part of his lip off when he was running back. But that was the only injury he got because he had already dispatched the guys he was fighting. So I got medevac to the Philippines the next day, head injuries, and spent 2 months in the Philippines getting every bone in my face was broken. I had fractures, skull fractures everywhere. Spent 2 months in the Philippines, 2 months at Walter Reed. So I had this general come in right at the end of the 4 months and said, Sergeant Edwards, I got good news and bad news. And he was a neurosurgeon who had worked on me in the Philippines, helped put me back together. He said, the bad news, you're not going to flight school. And I said, why, General? He says, because you got brain damage. I said, General, I was this way before. So he said, well, now you have an excuse for it because you got all these railroad tracks running through your head. And he said, you can carry your x-ray around in your back pocket and you'll never get convicted of any crime you ever decide to commit because you definitely have some injuries up there. And I said, so what's the good news? He said, well, we don't know why this happened. He said, I've consulted with my colleagues, and everybody knows with brain injuries, you don't know how they're going to manifest themselves, whether you're going to wake up sometime and start speaking Swahili when you've never been in Swahili land, or what it is. That's just a crazy place up there. I said, you're talking to the right guy. And so he said, we gave you the same test we gave you to get into the ASA again to see exactly where the damage occurred. And he said, your IQ went up 18 points. I said, did what? I said, you're actually telling me I had some sense beaten into me? He said, that's what I'm telling you.
Got smart enough to be.
I said, all my life, my dad used to say, one of these days somebody's going to beat some sense into you, and he was right. So that's that story. So after that, I came back, and I was in law school in Atlanta when the president came to town. So I graduated from college finally, and was in law school, and I had to, this is the other aspect of it that's kind of weird. I went back to the dean of the law school. It was John Marshall. It's still a school here, but it was a tiny school then. I went back to the dean, and I told him he let me leave for the 12 days to help with plan the trip up there. So after I got hired, I went back to him and told him that I'd been hired, and he said, you know what, I've never had an ex-White House aide in my little law school. When you get through up there, you need to come back here, and I'm going to help you get through the school. And he said, I'm going to make sure you pass the bar. And he looked around. This was again 1975 or 6. He said, I'm going to make sure you pass the bar. He said, even if I have to take it for him myself. And I said, Dean, I won't be coming back. I said, I've learned 2 things my first year here. And he said, what's that, Sam? And I said, 1, my neck is too big for a tie. And 2, my brain is too small for the law. He looked back. He said, it's not really too small. He said, it's just untidy. I said, okay, I'll accept that. I'll accept that. So that's the reason I never went back to law school. So
you never passed the bar?
Never had any intention to. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I was just going to law school because I didn't have any other idea about what to do.
Have you ever thought, it's like, that you missed out? Maybe it was like just for yourself, for your own ego to pass it?
No, I could have passed the bar anyway, man. That's not the way my brain works.
You never know. You're so lucky with everything.
No. That's I'm creative, but there's just too much. The law has no shortcuts. You got to go through all this process, and I'm a shortcut kind of guy. I know how to get from here to there, but I'm going to go the straight line. I'm not going to run 5, 6 ways to get to it. Yeah, my brain doesn't work that way. So, but then I did a bunch of stuff after that. I ended up in L.A. for 6 years, starving to death, and I was out there living on an old leaky boat. And this is how the spy stuff comes back to catch you, and So a guy that I'd worked with up in D.C. that was attached to the White House some was an intel guy, and he was an ex-Marine, I think. But we were the only two veterans up there because there wasn't a lot of veterans up there Vietnam veterans at the time. Even though I was a Southeast Asian veteran more than a Vietnam vet, but so we got to be buddies, and he knew what I did, but I never really knew what he did. So I'm living on this old leaky boat, and it's 1986, 5 or 6, and living on almost nothing. And but I'm writing, and that's all I want to do is I just want a place to write. And that's Beverly Hills lawyer owned the boat and let me live on it, as long as I didn't let it sink because it was leaking. And so I was the bilge pump on that boat. Excuse me. So I got a phone call, and me and this other guy that has a boat next to me shared a phone, and it was this guy's name. I'm going to use his name, but anyway. So he called me up, and he said Edwards, and I said, who is this? And he told me. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, why? I haven't talked to this guy in 5 years. And I never talked to him after 81, after we left the White House. And he said, well, I got something for you. I said, I don't need something. He said, I've checked your bank account. You don't have any money. I said, what are you doing in my bank account, which had about 50 cents in it? He said, don't worry about that. There's a ticket for you at L.A. Go over there tomorrow and come see me. I'm up at Arlington Hall Station, which is the old ASA headquarters, which is now headquarters of another one of the acronyms that I'm not going to name, but it's not the one with a C. It's a different one.
Okay.
So I get up there, and he said, here's the thing. He said, we have a group here that I put together, and we're doing military intel work around the world, and you've traveled a lot. And a lot of these places you've been, you were with the president, and you know the power structure. We don't have that information. We don't know who those people are. We have notes on them, but we don't know who they are. And I know you probably have notes on it, and the stuff you can't remember. So I sat in with a group and to begin with, and they're all serious intel guys, and most of them are older than me. I was 35 or 6 then. I was 26 at there. Yeah, what else? Yeah. So we go around the table about a particular country that I had been in, and then so I give them who I knew there, and I knew what their predilections were, political predilections, and what I thought they were capable of doing and what they weren't capable of doing, because they were trying to figure out. And some of this is counter intel work, trying to find out this guy's a bad guy or a good guy for us to work with. So. So he paid me a good bit of money, and I went back to the boat. So about once a month, he would call me up and say, there's a ticket for you. Come go. We got another meeting. I said, okay. And so that went on for a few years. And I was in Iran in, what year was that? I can't remember exactly, in the late 90s sometime. And being as a part of the old Carter administration, Iran is the last place that you wanted to be associated with the Carter administration because of the hostage thing. So I get a plainclothes Marine guard came and got me out of my hotel and said, you have a call at the embassy. And I thought somebody in my family was. But I was a freelance journalist at the time and also doing some international disaster relief work, which was good cover. Mm-hmm. So I went to the embassy, and it was my guy, and he says, while you're there, I said, wait a minute. This is field work in the most dangerous part of the world. If they even think that I'm not who I say I am, you just disappear in Iran. I mean, you literally, there's no arrest, there's no notice of you. They've got 3 or 4 prisons, and everybody in Intel knows about this, scattered around that country. You go there, and that's the last place you'll ever see. He said, but you're already there, and you're already looking at the stuff that we need you to look at in the story you're about to write. I said, how do you know? He said, on your computer, don't worry about it. I said, shit. He said, you can't hide. I'm sorry. You can't hide from, once a spook, you can't hide from them. So I said, I'm going to do it. But I said, don't you ever ask me to do this again. I'm not doing field work. That's how you end up dead. Mm-hmm. I've already been too close too many times. And so this doesn't stop. Every time I'm in, I spent a lot of time in Central America, South America, and Central Asia, and the Middle East, and every time I was somewhere where I didn't need a phone call, He had tracked me down because they follow you wherever you are anyway, and asked me to do something. But Afghanistan was the last straw. It was I had gotten the info that they asked me to get, and all I was normally doing is corroborating some stuff they already had. But you have to get sources, all that come from different angles, to make sure that one guy's telling the same guys as the other guys, same story the other guy's telling you. So I'd been there. Almost got blown up 3 times in about 3 months or whatever, and they hadn't had an explosion in Kabul in 2.5 years, and I'm there, and there's 3 in 3 months. Mm-hmm. And the one that happens December the 17th of 2009, they were trying to kill former Vice President Massoud. His brother is the one that ran the Taliban out of Afghanistan. It went off about a block and a half from me and knocked me down and knocked my interpreter out and killed 50 people just like that in front of me. And, I had seen a lot of carnage, but I'd just about turned 60, and I said, we got up and went back and tried to help everybody that was still alive, and it wasn't many of them, and was concerned about another explosion going off because that's how they normally work over there. And the first responders showed up, and we started back to my safe house, and my interpreter was named Sam in Pashto. He fell over on his face, and I thought it was post-concussive shock or something because my ears were really ringing. Boy, that was a big bomb. And so I picked up Sam, and I shook him and wake, and when he woke up, he was crying. And I said, Sam, what's wrong? This was 10:45 on a Tuesday morning, December 17, 2009. He said, you knew where we were standing yesterday at 10:45. The only time in my life my left knee shook. We were standing right where it went off. Missed it one day. That's it. I'm gone. Don't need this anymore.
Yeah, you had a lot of close calls.
Whoa, too close. Too close. Because there was not a wound to sit. That was not a wound situation. That was a goner's what that was. I went back to my safe house, grabbed everything I could, went back to the airport, went up to the desk, and the lady says, where do you want to go? And I said, the first plane out of this place. Ended up in New Delhi. It took me 54 and a half hours to get home. Now, here's what's weird. December the 17th is my wife's birthday. Mm-hmm. Well, that was 2009. I didn't meet her until 2012. Should I tell about the book? I got to tell you this story. You're not going to believe this story. 1992, I'm living in my treehouse. So I'm working on a book that I call Moose Bucks. And it's about a guy who lives in a treehouse, an ex-baseball player. I played semi-pro baseball when I came back from the Army. Ex-baseball player who lives in a treehouse, who owns a burger joint, who falls in love with a veterinarian, mm-hmm. who was raised in the Pacific Islands, who went to the University of Georgia at 17 and graduated from the University of Georgia Vet School. That was 1992, 20 years before I met her. Mm-hmm. I put that book in a drawer and didn't think anything more about it because I went off doing some other stuff. So 2012, I got the restaurant. I'm an ex-baseball player, owns a burger joint, never married, living in a treehouse. 2 friends of hers bring her in to meet me because I had gotten to be friends with them. So I didn't want to meet anybody. I had to try to learn how to run a restaurant that I know nothing about. She's raising a 6 and a 7-year-old, and she's running her veterinary practice. She didn't have time for romantic shenanigans. So she was against it too, and so was I. So they kept bringing her in and trying to get me to talk, and I'd go over and be just as nice as I could, but she was ready for me to leave. The minute I walked up anyway, and I was ready to get out of there anyhow. But one day, they called me over and got me to sit down, and as soon as I sat down, they got up and left me and Melissa sitting there staring at one another. And I said, look, they're not going to leave us alone. I said, we're going to just have a 30-minute date some Sunday afternoon, shake hands and go to neutral corners and tell them it didn't work. Super Bowl Sunday, 2012. So Melissa knows that I've got my old blue pickup truck that belonged to my daddy. She knows I have an old red Jeep. What she doesn't know that when I sold a book in 1999 about my life, a memoir, that I spent every penny that I made off that book on a red Porsche. She didn't know about the red Porsche. So It's a Super Bowl Sunday. It's beautiful outside. I got the top down. I drive up to where she's parked in the front of the restaurant waiting on me Sunday afternoon. And when I pull up in the parking lot, she gives me this look. It's a sneer. It's like, and I'm going, what, you know? She said, I'm not even getting in the car with you. And I said, why? And she says, because you just checked the third box. I said, what? She said, you just checked the third box. You're the kind of guy me and my girlfriends talk about. Older guy, never married, red Porsche. You're a player. I'm not getting in the car with you. So I said, if you don't get in the car and let's drive around for 30 minutes, then they're never going to leave us alone. So she got in the car and we drove around and we talked for 6 hours. Actually, I talked for 5.5 hours and she talked for 30 minutes. But then the hook was set. So she goes back and calls her friends. She said, well, I had that date. And she said, how was it? She said, well, I'm in trouble. She said, after the first date, she said, no, not that kind of trouble. She said, I like the guy. She said, we've been telling you for 6 months you like this guy. So I didn't know all this stuff that I'd written about 30 years ago. I mean, when I found out she was a veterinarian, she said sometime on that date that I said, I can't believe it's you. We're out of time yet? Okay. I run a lot of people out of time.
We still got 20 minutes. Well, definitely we'll do like a second episode part soon.
So anyway, so when she tells me about being a veterinarian, I said, that's pretty crazy because I wrote that book. And it's still in my desk drawer at the treehouse. I've never taken it out. So over the next 3 or 4 months, I'll start learning this stuff about her, that she was raised in Hawaii, the Pacific Islands. Mm-hmm. And she went to University of Georgia at 17, which is not unique, or really unique, because it's usually 18 or 19 when you go to college. And that she was raised in the Pacific Islands, went to University of Georgia, and went to University of Georgia Vet School. Same stuff that I wrote about 20 years before. And I finally told her after all this stuff became real, I said, I got to let you read a book. And it may scare you to death because I wrote it and I don't believe it. So I went back and got it out, and did we let Baylock read the book? Is that he one he said that conjured you up? Was that BB? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So she read the book and she told BB, her mama, about it. And BB, they're from Louisiana. You don't know anything about Louisiana, but Louisiana are different people. That's South Louisiana. They make us look normal. And I
heard stories.
Yeah, Cajun people, yeah. And so BB, when she told BB that story, BB kind of whispered back. She says, I don't know if you know this or not, but I think he conjured you up. Chicken bones and, buckeyes and all that kind of crazy stuff. So anyway, I got the book out. Here's the problem with it. I didn't remember anybody ever reading that book or me letting anybody read it. So it was just me, I thought. I said, nobody's ever going to believe this. So we were I had gone up, I'd done some work on it and done an edit on it, was getting ready to publish it. And so we went up to Treehouse, and I found an article that a lady named Rita Grimsley Johnson, who was a columnist for Atlanta paper, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, had been up there, and she'd done 2 or 3 stories on me in the Treehouse and being a guy who used to work at the White House, now lives in a tree. That's kind of unique. And so she had been up there, and she had, in one of her stories, I had framed on the Treehouse wall. I just picked the story up, and I hadn't read it in years. And so I just read the first 3 paragraphs, and in the third paragraph, she said, and now Sam is working on a book called Moose Bucks. I said, thank you, Jesus. And then my brain popped around in another turn, and I had let a buddy of mine, and I had forgotten about it, but I called him up, and I hadn't talked to him in 30 years. And his name's Mike Bibb. And I said, Bibb, didn't I let you read a book that I had written? Because he was always hounding me about, let me read something you've written. And I said, didn't I let you read a book back in the 90s when we were gym buddies together? He said, yeah, you mean the one about that moose? And I said, I think it's exactly what I'm talking about. So that's number 2. And then I recognized at some point that I had let an old high school teacher of mine named Jim Lay read it. And Jim was about 92 or 3 when I asked him about it. He said, I remember that thing. And I said, you can't even remember your name, much less. I'm kidding, Jim, because he's still alive. But so I got 3 provenances, 3 people that actually know that I wrote that book in 1992. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, nobody would ever believe it. So it was finally published out. So it's a it's different. It's a different story, and those kind of stories come around once in a lifetime, and that's all.
There's a lot of coincidences. I feel like you just manifested the whole life.
Well, that's what she says. Yeah, actually, so.
Power of positive, power of thinking, power of
I'm not positive about
attracting,
just creative thinking, maybe. Yeah.
Attracting stuff that you want.
Well, I think the biggest when people ask why you've done all that stuff and why you tackle all this stuff you don't know anything about, I just never had any fear. I just figured I could figure out wherever I ended up, I could figure out whatever I need to be doing.
When you do something, you say you don't think, you just do it. But do you have any thoughts coming through? It's like, oh, it might not happen. Or it's like some fears coming through. Or it's just like, it doesn't even exist. It's just like, whatever. I'll figure out a way.
No, I just never had any fear about anything. I just always think about brain will figure it out. Whatever I stumble into. But a Greek philosopher one time said, "Life leads its lovers and betrays its rebels," and it's true. And you have to every time I ever tried to do something in my life, I just blew it. I said, and that the time I spent in the hospital, 4 months, I spent mostly on my back thinking and reading. And when you're 24, 25 years old, you normally don't get that segment of time where you don't have anything to do but think. So that's when I said, you know what, I'm just going to let life come to me. I'm not going to go out there and try to knock a bridge down to get where I need to go to get across the river or build a bridge to get across the river. I said, it's just going to let it happen. And just about every time I thought, everything was getting a little dull, something would happen. The Carter stuff, the boat stuff, the bomb stuff, and it just. And again, my curiosity is such. I just need to know stuff, and if I need to know something, I think most of it when I read the World Book Encyclopedia through both times or all 18 volumes through twice, that made me think outside Georgia. Because I saw the rest of the world, and that's the 7th grade I did that. Never went to class, but I read the encyclopedias. So it gave me a broader education, and I realized. So when I read across the word autodidact the first time when I was in high school reading a book in class I shouldn't have been reading, I said, that's what I do. I teach myself because I'm too stubborn to learn it from anybody else. I have to know it. I have to learn it by doing it. So, but. I've just never had, just the fear was never a component in my thought process. Should have been a few times, but it almost got me killed a couple of times.
But it's almost, it never did.
Yeah, that's right, but almost it don't count,
So still, God looks after you, which is...
Yeah,
It's amazing.
Speaking of the God thing, my mom was a Sunday school teacher, and my granddad was a Baptist preacher. So my mom was a really, really serious Christian, and she never told a fib in her life. And so when I sold a memoir in 1999, and I had to let my mama read it. And this was a story about me growing up, and every story in there is stuff that my mama didn't know anything about. I mean, I told the good and the bad, So I let her read the loose leaf manuscript before it because she's got all these students, these Sunday school students she's taught for 30 years, 40 years, because she actually taught for 70 years Sunday school. She was in her 80s when she quit teaching. But she's got to have some basis to go back and tell all these people that she taught how she turned out a kid, that should have been put in jail when he was 5 years old. And so I let her read the book. And so I gave it to her, and she sat down on the sofa, and I said, Mama, I said, this is that book that's about to be published, and you need to read it, because I had not let her or even told her about it. I told her I was writing a book, but I didn't tell her it was a memoir. Mm-hmm. So I said, Mama, I said, this is a really honest book. And I thought she'd appreciate that because honesty is the last thing she ever got out of me. And so she said, I can't wait to read it. And I'm going, yeah, you can too. So I didn't tell her anything about when I saw the hammer, when I saw the finger go inside the trigger house right before I got shot at. I yelled Jimmy just as loud as I could because I figured it's the last thing I'd ever say. Well, I told Mother and Daddy that story, a truncated, cleaned up version of it, but I wanted them to know there was one guy that was responsible for me still being alive, and it was my buddy Jimmy Sladak. So I'm sitting there telling them the story, And when I tell Mom that I yelled for Jimmy, she was aghast. And I thought she'd going to be, oh, this Jimmy, I got to meet him. She went, she said, Sam, why didn't you yell for God? I said, Mommy, I didn't know where God was. I could see Jimmy. He was standing right over there.
Jimmy was right next to me.
I didn't know where God was. He might have been busy. I needed somebody right then. So, yeah, there was a religious component in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, tell you honestly, I didn't expect this turnout for the interview. It's ended up being even way more interesting than I expected. Because I thought we were only going to talk about business, but I was like, your life is way more interesting than that. I'm pretty sure business is also interesting, but your life is in general is just amazing.
Well, I guess.
I would love to read your book.
Yeah, okay.
So after we finish, I would like to find it. So if you can help me find it,
Yeah.
I would love that.
No problem.
And the last question for you for this interview.
Yeah.
But if you be down, we'll do another episode
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
And for this one, I can even drive to you. So we can switch the area and the setting.
Sure.
And also see your place. Out of all the experiences in your life, right? You tried different things. You been in different places, meet different people, near-death experiences. What would you think the most lucrative, like the most important thing in your life that you had? Do you regret you never met her before, like earlier in your life?
No, because, the last thing, because Melissa's younger than me, 20 years younger. I thought that was that was never going to work out, But she mentions a lot of times about and says, I wish I'd known you before. And I said, you couldn't have handled it before because and I've seen this other guys that I've met who have done this kind of work. If you tell your spouse or your girlfriend, I'm going to be gone for 3 or 4 months, but I can't tell you where, who is she?
Yeah.
That's the next question,
True.
So I said that would just never. She says, click. Clip goes in the pistol. You're not getting out of my sight. I'm going to find out who it is, and she's out of here. So I said that just wouldn't, because I had seen over the 20-something years I did that work in different parts of the world, the guys I came across, and there were very few, because when you're in that work, nobody knows, you're compartmentalized. Nobody knows what else you do. The only time I ever saw some of those guys is when we did meetings in D.C., which is very rare, and nobody ever knew your real name anyway. And I said, I would ask those guys, I said, so who's married in here? And it took two or three hands to go up. And I said, well, wait a minute, who has been married? And everybody's able to go up. So it's just not a job. And it's not like that dissimilar on folks who play spies on TV. They can't last in relationships. You just can't do it. Trust issue's not there,
Well, yeah, because you can tell everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's the most important in a relationship, especially marriage, is the communication.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing is, too, I was not looking for a mate when nobody expected me to get married, because I was always gone somewhere, doing something nobody you could talk about or, didn't want to talk about or whatever. So when I wrote a book about getting a spouse, as it were, then I knew I couldn't deny that, because it was, you don't write 20 years before you meet somebody just about everything about them, and then not go, okay, somebody's talking to me, this is kismet, serendipity, like all the other big stuff that's happened in my life. This is another one of those things that just happened like it was supposed to, So now I got 2 great kids. I got to adopt both her boys, Eli and Gabe. And this is another one of those weird things. Eli, the oldest one, looks exactly like me. And the youngest one, Gabe, looks exactly like Melissa. Now, having grown up in a really small town and know everybody in town and not been married until I got to be 65, when our pictures came out first as being married on the Facebook and I didn't find this out for a couple of years. A buddy of mine came to me. He says, you know what the scuttlebutt is? What? I said, what? Because he's the biggest gossip in town. He said, everybody says the same thing. There ain't no way in the world Eli's not yours. I said, no, he was just part of the equation, But that's another one of those, It's not like every time we get introduced somewhere, the first thing they'll say is, "You look a lot like your dad." And her dad saw us after we'd been together about a year. Eli was standing in the corner. Eli was 9 or 10 years old then. Eli and I were standing in the corner one Christmas or something, and Grant, her dad, came up to me. He said, "You sure you didn't know my daughter about 10 years ago?" I said, "No, Grant, I didn't." It's just my hand to God. So,
Well, thank you so much, sir.
oh yeah, I had fun. I told you we'd have fun.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward for more.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I hope it's gonna open more doors, like to have more conversations.
Sure,
Because
absolutely.
you have a lot of stories, and I love stories. I love
Yep.
to hear. I don't like to talk. I like to listen.
Yeah. Well, dude, you're not going to be doing too much talking if you're listening to me.
But perfect.
There's no room.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
That works out
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Daniel, I appreciate you.
Thank you
you
as
for
well.
having me.
Thank
Yep.
you.